Hello! Reading lesson that covers changes in international commerce, how ethics and fair trade can make a difference. In this lesson, we will do a scanning warm-up exercise to get familiar with the key words and the reading. Then is a matching feature question, questions 1 to 5. Questions 6 to 10 are gap fill, and finally 11 to 14 are multiple choice questions. To start, I will review the pronunciation of our key vocabulary words. You will need to know these words to find the answers. Now, I have some flashcards with the most important keywords, all the words actually. And the first one is a match the words and the definitions to the example sentences. The second set of flashcards is a match the words and the example sentences to the definitions. And the third flashcard set is traditional words on one side, definition on the other. Okay, I'm going to go through our vocabulary list quickly here, doing the pronunciation. If you want to skip the pronunciation and go straight to our warm-up scanning exercise, feel free. I'll be pointing out some of the key sounds along the way. First word is agricultural. Agricultural. Has that ch and that cousin. Agricultural. Make sure you have the agricultural. Another R sound is barrel. Barrel. We have another B and R. Barring. Barring. And next is bear in mind. Bear in mind. Okay. Next, 4 all have this k sound in it. Cash crops, commerce, complicate, consequence. Let's go through those 4 again. Cash crops, commerce, complicate, consequence. So these words are all great to practice your b, and k sounds. Next, cynical. Make sure you have that s and not a k. Cynical. Design. Design. Right here, I've heard some people say design and design. So be aware, you might hear both design, design. All right, destruction. Destruction. Enable. Enable. We have another k. Ethical. It's a soft sound. Ethical. Exception. Exception. That's be hard because you have this and the sh. Exception. Exploit. Exploit. And that as ek. Exploit. Fitting. Fitting. Foreign. Foreign. Guarantee. Goes up at the end. Guarantee. Infertile. Infertile. International. Make sure you have that ch right there. International. Luxury. Another j sound. Luxury. Another ch. Manufacture. Manufacture. Those sounds again. International. Luxury. Manufacture. Motivation. Motivation. Objective. Objective. Negotiated. Negotiated. Paradox. Paradox. Producer. Producer. Profit margin. Profit margin. Propose. Double P sound. Propose. Relatively. Relatively. Rob. Rob. Suitable. Suitable. Sustainability. Sustainability. Okay, so practice those vocabulary terms on the flashcards if you want or need to. We're going to start with a scanning exercise now. Okay, so for our scanning exercise, I have chosen the 20 most important words that you will need to know to do this reading. They are in order that they appear. So that means if you find exception, you know guarantee came before it, and the next word is luxury. All paragraphs have at least one scanning question. And if you want some help, if you want to make this a little easier, you can click this box down here, the yellow text, and it will tell you how many words are in each paragraph. Here are our answers for the reading. Let's move on to the matching feature question. Matching feature questions, remember the features A, B, C, the things you have to match to the questions. These may not be the exact words they use in the reading. They may use synonyms or similar phrases. Keep that in mind. What you should do when you have these questions is start by highlighting the key words. So these are going to be words that that are meaning words, like manufactured goods or obtainable. I might think of key phrase lower than elsewhere. So a synonym that comes to mind is cheaper or discounted rates or reduced price. So be thinking of synonyms as you go through this. So if you want some help, click that yellow box. It will tell you which paragraphs have those features, which paragraph talks about A, which paragraph talks about B, which paragraph talks about C. But so when you're finding the answers in a reading, it's important that you know where it talks about that idea in the reading. I like reading reading tests because I feel like it's a puzzle and the answer to the questions is somewhere in the text. And I have to find the parts of the text that give me the information for the answer. So I enjoy that. It's like a hunt or a search. So let's go ahead and search for the information for number one. Number one, I find the answer in paragraph B. Now, if you find the answer somewhere else, if you see something that you think this is where it tells the answer, that's fine. That's part of the reading. Now, number one, of course, the question is manufactured goods are obtainable at a lower price elsewhere, and that comes right up here. And it says the price, highlight that really quickly. So the price at which goods are sold. This may vary greatly from country to country, and people are often surprised to see exactly the same item for sale at 2 or 3 times the price as it sells for in another country. So see something for sale 2 or 3 times more the price. Well, if it's 2 or 3 times, it's more expensive. And why? Well, let's keep reading. This seems interesting. And it says down here, it often comes down to the fact people in poor countries simply cannot afford to pay that amount of money those in rich countries. Ba-boom. And that is where I get the answer. I understand you may not have found the answer in this first part, 2 or 3 times more the price, but that was my hint when it said 2 or 3 times. This was my hint. And then, of course, our answer is right there. So go back down over here, and our answer is C, a country being poor. Okay. Next up is harm to producers of raw materials is minimized. I see this in paragraph D, and it says ethical trade. So this was a little easy because it has that term for us. It says ethical trade began as an attempt to cause as little damage as possible to producers of raw materials and manufactured goods. Oh, they just gave us the answer for that one. That was very easy. So ethical trade. Human rights being respected. I also saw this in D as well. And it says this movement, referring to ethical trade, put pressure on industry to see that working conditions and human rights were not damaged. Not damaged. And they're seeing to it that they're not damaged. That is protected, respected. That is B, ethical trade. All right. More land is not used to produce food for the local population. I saw this right down here in paragraph E, and it says, worse still, while agricultural land is given over to cash crops, it robs the local people of the ability to grow their own food. And that is not land is not used to produce food for the local population, their own food. Boom, there we go. So this one, and this was hard, by the way. So this is hard. It's still not very clear, is it? It's still not very clear if what this one may be. But if you look up here, developing world where local producers were forced under economic pressure and cash crops. So this one was tricky if you found the answer there, but you have to understand developing world forced by economic pressure. So I suppose we should highlight that because you need to see this to really understand the answer down there. Why? Which answer is it? Because they do talk about not growing their own food. Well, it's country being poor. Okay, this one here, 5, the local community has more chance of survival. I found this actually in paragraph F. And it says, fair trade organizations view sustainability as a key aim. This involves implementing policies where producers are given a fair price of goods they sell, so they and their communities continue to operate. Well, continue to operate, more chance of survival, those are synonymous ideas. They are stretching it. But sustainability has a suggestive meaning of greater chance of survival. You're sustainable and be able to continue in the future. So that seems greater chance. Down here, continue to operate. Well, okay, you can't operate without, you have to survive to operate. So this is probably the hardest of them, of the 5 questions, I think. But it is right here, fair trade policies. All right. Questions 6 to 10 are gap fill questions. These questions, so first, when you have this type of question set, start by reading the text and ask yourself, where in the reading does it talk about the ideas for these questions? I'll tell you now that there is more than one paragraph that talks about the ideas in this little paragraph for questions 6 to 10. If you click the help box for questions 6 to 10, it will tell you which paragraphs contain these ideas. I suggest you try to find the paragraphs before you click that help box. Now, another thing with these matching feature questions, they are in the order of the text. So that means question number 7, the answer for question 6 comes before 7 in the text, and then the next answer in the text is number 8. And then the next one is 9, and the last one is 10. So they are in the order that you will see them in the text. Another thing is highlight key words for these questions. I'll tell you now that there are some synonyms for these questions. So I'm going to highlight the key words that contain the synonyms in the text. I'm not going to tell you what those synonyms are, but I will highlight and make it a little easier and show you which words have synonyms in the text that you will need to find the answer. If you don't want this little help, then pause the video here and come back after you have found the answers. And I encourage. Okay, so I'm going to highlight these key words that use synonyms in the text. First is companies, and they also use a synonym for carries out. Next, they will use a synonym for decide, as well as are sold at. Sorry, there we go. Are sold at. Okay. Next comes after 7, and they change the word taxes to something else. I see another synonym used for can afford, and this word insure, as well as particular item. There we go. Finally, we have a synonym used for luxury or specialist goods. All right, let's find those answers now. I'm going to look for questions 6, 7, and 8 first, because those are dealt with in paragraph B, whereas 9 and 10 are in paragraph C. So 6, 7, 8, it says, companies carry out blank to decide the price that their goods are sold at in each country. The prices of the same goods can vary in different countries because of or taxes. The blank is finalized depending on how much customers in a particular market can afford. All right, so let's go up paragraph B, and we see a key word right here, seller. Turn on the highlight tool. Seller is a key word because we had companies. Carry out, okay, that's a synonym. And then we see decide. That's going to be another synonym right there. It's decide, carry out, and I'm sorry, we should highlight. Decide will be sold. Okay, now this is because we see that are sold at will be sold. So the answer is right here. And the answer is market research. So from the point of the view of the seller, market research must determine the price which the gold will be sold. And there's our answer. So let's go ahead and type that in down below. We'll close that. So market. And if you don't put in the word market, that is okay. It is optional. Coming up to 7, the prices of the same goods can vary differently in different countries because of, I think that's a fairly easy one. They can vary greatly, right? And says down here, why? Because taxation and local government controls is the same word. So they use that same right there, are often behind this. So we see taxes, sorry, confused myself. Local government controls. There we go. There we go. So local government controls, you don't need local. We could, cool. There we go. Local government controls. The blank is finalized depending on how much customers in a particular market can afford. This is a tricky question. I thought this one was hard. And it is right down here, price list. So you see, cannot afford, well, that was the answer to one of our previous questions. We'll have to delete that, unfortunately. And it comes down here, cannot afford. So sometimes beyond this, but it comes down to the fact people in poor countries simply cannot afford to pay the same amount of money as those in rich countries. Though these are things seller has to bear in mind when preparing the price list for goods in each country. Undo that so we have our original answer back. Right. Oi, can't type today. There we go. Price list. So can afford, it's a little tricky. They do use that synonym cannot afford, but it is a little tricky. And let's go on to these 9 and 10. So it says blank of a particular item, manufacturers can have a higher profit margin on luxury or specialist goods, which often have a blank. All right. Now, of a particular item, this is going to be up here. We'll go to C, and it says of a particular item. Well, it's number of units. That's the synonym. It's not the answer, but it is the synonym to of a particular item, of units. And the answer is maximum number. That's the answer. So of units is the synonym they use for particular item. If you don't see these synonyms, that's okay. But you should be trying to notice in the reading, oh, that matches with that, because that's how you know these are your answers. All right. Last is manufacturers can have a higher profit margin on luxury or specialist goods, which often have a blank. Well, the answer is limited market. And if we go back up to paragraph C, luxury or specialist goods, they use that, right? You see a synonym right there. And then it says these goods, referring to luxury or specialist goods, are often goods which have there's a limited market. Okay. And different rules apply because the profit margin is much higher. So luxury goods and then much higher profit margin, those all go with higher profit margin up there. Same synonym. Let me underline that and underline that key synonym up here. Profit margin, much higher. Okay, so let's move on to questions 11 to 14. Questions 11 to 14 are multiple choice questions. For when you have a multiple choice question, you should underline or highlight the keywords in the question. I've done a lot of highlighting this video, so I'm not going to highlight before we see the answers. When we're reviewing the answers, though, I will show you the synonyms that they use in the text and the questions. Now, click these yellow boxes for each question to see which paragraph has the answer. Pause the video and come back when you are ready. Okay, so for question 11, the answer is A, the comparative value of goods. And I see a couple synonyms that they use. So I see one here about early traders, and they use a similar word. They say hunters and indeed thousands and thousands of years ago. And then disagreed, they use the word disagreements. Let me go show you the answer real quick. Instead of comparative value of goods, I think they use the phrase, how many axes is a barrel of oil worth, for example. So coming up to paragraph A. All right. And I see here. So people let's start up from the beginning. Purpose of international trade, commerce trade, is to buy things and sell things to people in other countries. Hundreds and indeed thousands of years ago, this actually worked quite well. So how did it work? People who traveled foreign lands by ship would work out and trade, work with items for trade. Agricultural countries, for example, would provide olive or weapons that worked with other items. All that needed to be negotiated for a fair price. How many axes or oil, for example? I think this is a little tricky because you have to understand compared value of good and early traders disagree about. Well, they don't really talk about disagreements, do they? But it does say all that would be needed, all that needed to be negotiated is a fair price. And then it gives an example of what I think to be the definition. So, what is the comparative value of goods? Well, how many axes is a barrel of oil worth? And that's what they mean by comparative value. Again, that's a tricky one, I think. Going down to number 12, the answer is smaller profits. So, the main consequence of a product being in demand, there's smaller profit margins. And we see that being in demand, they use a synonym, and they use nearly everyone wants to own. We jump up to paragraph B, and we see it right country to country. Oh shoot, where was it? Sorry, I'm looking at paragraph B. Duh, my mistake. No wonder why it wasn't there. Thinking, gosh. Okay. And here we go. So there's a limited market. The profit margin is much higher. And then it comes down here. So for instance, when nearly everyone wants to own, that's the synonym they use, a television or mobile phone, there's lots of competition in the area of production, forcing prices to be competitive too. Producers have to sell a large number of items to make a profit because their profit margin is small. There's your answer right there, because their profit margin is small. So, main consequence of being in demand, you can see they have to sell a large number of items. It wouldn't make sense. These other ones don't quite fit. Higher prices, no, they actually said it was lower. If you're being purchased, well, that doesn't make sense because it's in demand, right? It's in demand if they have more items being produced, supposedly, or you would think. And less market competition, well, they say the opposite. They actually say there is a lot of competition. Okay, now number 13 down here, we see a word community, and they use the same word in the text. And destroyed, well, they use destruction. So it's very similar. Our answer is C. How might an agricultural community be destroyed? Because they overuse the land in order to grow cash crops. So you see this in paragraph E. And they say right up here. So, been an example throughout the world, economic cash crops, not price. Worse still, land is given to cash crops that robs, grow their own food. And here, in time, through overproduction, the land becomes spent and infertile, leading poverty, starvation, and sometimes the destruction of the whole community. So jumping down says, how am I agricultural? Because they overuse the land. Going back up, overproduction. There's your answer. So you get the answer C from overproduction right there, or at least I did. Finally, 14 is D. Paradox, we know already. We saw that. That's one of our vocabulary words that we got earlier. They have actually a couple synonyms in this answer, which is how I was able to find it. So for will gain, they use will help them to. Don't support them. They say cynical about. That was one of our other vocabulary words, cynical about. So this is where knowing those vocabulary is really important. Let's jump up to paragraph D, or I'm sorry, G, and we see it here. So, although businesses may feel cynical about the operation that does not regard profit as the main driving force, the paradox is that it will help them too. So, I'm going to highlight that. And it kind of explains why. But they also guarantee a constant new supply of materials, benefits everyone, whether the motive is profit. So you see down here, though, big businesses will gain from these policies, even though they don't support them. All right. So will gain will help them too. Right here, we can't delete that. Will help them too. And don't support them are cynical about. So are cynical about, don't support them. I wouldn't, these are not the first synonyms that come to mind for either word, but they are related. They do have the kind of similar meaning. And the word paradox, you should have known the answer had to be right here because they only use that word once. That's a special word, paradox. They only use it once. All right. So I hope this video was helpful for you. Please download and share this PDF with others if you think it will help them. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.